Goforth. I'm a librarian here. I run our design lab, which is this computer lab just outside the classroom. And it's a space where we help students with graphic design projects of all kinds, including using Adobe software. So today is our workshop. It's Introduction to Adobe for Graphic Design. We're going to do a really brief introduction to the three major tools for graphic design from Adobe, which are Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. So how many people do we have from the Makeathon? Lots of you folks, yay, welcome. I'm excited to be doing a workshop for you guys. We're also doing a visual identity workshop tomorrow night in 1789. So if you want to learn even more and work on actually the branding for your idea that you're going to pitch, then definitely come to that workshop as well. All right, today we're just really going to be doing software. Welcome. All right, so today's going to be a very hands-on workshop. If you look on the back of your handout, it has a kind of step-by-step of what we're going to be creating today. We're going to be creating this postcard for a mythical flower shop. So the idea here is that you'll be in the software. That's really the best way to learn the software, is to get in it and start to learn and play around in it. All right. So who has used an Adobe program before? Some folks. What programs have we used? InDesign? Illustrator? Photoshop. Are those mostly the ones? Okay. So when you go to the list of Adobe tools, there are like 1,000 tools seemingly, right? There's like a bunch of them. And there are a lot of different tools for a lot of different things. And I think for new people to use software, it always doesn't always, you don't know what tool to use for what thing, right? It can be kind of confusing. And honestly, there is some overlap. There are some products that you could create in Illustrator or Photoshop really kind of just as easily. But we're going to talk about what each program is really meant to do, and then we're going to do a little project in each tool, all right? So, by the way, if you get lost or confused, this is Christopher. He's going to be floating around and helping. If you get confused and need someone to want to help, just wave your hand and he can come over and help. Or you can wave your hand and tell me to do something again. I'm happy to step back a step, okay? All right. Before we get started, we do have an image file that we're going to use in our project today. So if everyone could go to this website, which is skillful.web.unc.edu. Come on in, guys. Do you want to work with them and see if they have the software installed? Thank you. So if you go to skillful.web.unc.edu, this is our workshop series website. And if you scroll down and go to the event for today, if you click on Intro to Adobe for Graphic Design here, and you scroll down, there are some workshop resources right here I want to point out. This first image is an image that we're going to download and use for our project. If you click on it here, you'll get this image. Go ahead and right-click to Save Image As, and save it to somewhere that you know how to get to later. I always save it to my desktop because that's easiest for me. And go ahead and save that JPEG to your hard drive somewhere. Again, that's skillful.web.unc.edu. Go to the event for today and download the JPEG under Workshop Resources. All right, that work for everyone? Okay. And then go ahead and launch Photoshop, which is the tool that we are going to be using today. All right. All right. Once you have Photoshop open, we're going to go ahead and open that file, the JPEG file that we just downloaded. So you can go here to open or File Open. I'm going to go to my desktop, which is where I put that JPEG, and go ahead and open that file. All right. So I grabbed this image from a stock photo website called unsplash.com, which is a great stock photo website. So it's a free image, and I've decided that this is a really great image for me to build my postcard on. All right. So Photoshop is one of Adobe's most famous tools. It is the tool that a lot of people learn first. And it is the tool that is best at manipulating and editing and compositing photos. So if we have a nice photo here and we can edit this in lots of different ways, there are lots of really great retouching tools that allow you to remove imperfections from your photos. There are tools that allow you to take multiple photos and kind of blend them together in creative ways. And that's really, the photo manipulation is what Photoshop is really great at. It is a raster-based graphics tool. Does anyone know what that means? Raster-based or pixel-based? Anyone know what a pixel is? Right, we all know what pixels is. So if I zoom in on this image, zoom, 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 way, zoom, zoom in. Well, if I get to a brighter part of my image, oops, I can see that this photo is made of these little tiny little blocks of color called pixels. Okay, that is a raster-based image. JPEGs, PNGs, TIFFs, these are all raster-based graphics, which means that the image is created with these little tiny blocks of color. So everything we do in Photoshop is manipulating these little blocks of color, moving them around, changing their color, that kind of thing. That is what Photoshop does. It's changing these little pixels, all right? So there are a few things I want to do to this image before I'm ready to use it for my postcard, right? There are some imperfections here in the top right corner that I want to get rid of. And then I also want to brighten, I want to saturate the color a little more to give it a little more pop, right? It's a little toned down for me. I want this to be a really bright, colorful postcard. So we're going to do those things in Photoshop. If you've never been in an Adobe tool, the general interface for a lot of their tools is very similar. On the left-hand side, you have a toolbar. If you hover over a tool, you get a little tooltip that tells you, now you get a little tutorial about what that tool is. The tools that have this tiny little triangle in the corner means that they have nested tools underneath. So if I click and hold on a tool, a little fly-out menu happens with related tools kind of hiding underneath that tool. Right? I have options across my top in my menu bar. And then over here, these are called panels, which give you even more options to manipulate your artwork. All right? So we're going to start off with some of the photo retouching tools in Photoshop and get rid of some of this mess over here because I don't want any of this stuff here. So a lot of the retouching tools are here under the spot healing brush tool. All right? If you hold, it looks like a Band-Aid with a little magic swirl around it. If you go ahead and click on that tool to select it and drag your cursor out onto your artboard, you see you have a little tiny circle, which is a little brush, right? What a spot healing brush does is it looks at the surrounding pixels and takes away what is different, all right? So if I put it around these little black specks, it's going to see, well, everything's gray except this black stuff, so I'm going to take it away. Right now my cursor is a little too tiny. You can see it's really too small. If yours is also too small, you can go right up here in this top left corner, this little caret. That allows you to change the size of your brush. I'm going to pump it up quite a bit like that. So now my brush is a little bigger. And then I'm going to start clicking here on my, hold on, sorry. And now it's not working. The spot healing brush tool.
Try adding the sample layers selected at the top.
Is this working for other people? When you click with the spot healing brush tool, do those little black specks disappear?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so Adobe, welcome to Adobe. Sometimes it does weird things, like mine is not working right now. So we'll hope that other tools do work, but you can see as you click here, these little black specks should be disappearing. Who is it not working for? Anyone? No? Yay! All of your tools are working the way they're supposed to work. Mystery. All right, so that is a spot healing brush tool. It is really a magical tool. It's great for getting rid of skin imperfections. If you have a person with acne or moles, you can just click on it and it magically takes it away. And again, it's looking at the surrounding pixels and kind of getting rid of what's different. All right. Another really cool tool, if you click and hold on the spot healing brush tool, there's another one called the patch tool. And the way this one works, if you drag a circle around an area of imperfections like this, you should be able to click and drag, and now my patch tool is working, so that's good. You can drag around, and now what it's doing basically is it's copying from wherever you drag this to onto where you're dragging from. Does that make sense? So again, another really great was kind of like you're creating a patch, right? You're copying pixels from one place and moving them onto another place. All right, is that working for everyone? All right, so there are other spot retouching tools. Most of them are nested here under the spot healing brush tool. There's a red eye tool that's really good for getting red eye. If you have people in your photo with red eye, that's a good one. And then one other retouching tool that I like to use a lot is this one. It's called the clone stamp tool. It looks like an old-fashioned rubber stamp. And what this tool allows you to do, I'm going to use this tool to get rid of this area over here, this crease. Again, I'm going to make my brush a little bigger, just in the same place I did, right here, this little caret, to make it a little bigger. And what this clone stamp tool is, basically it allows you to copy from one place onto another, right? So basically what I want to do is I want to copy the pixels from right here onto this crease, right? So basically I'm going to put my cursor right here next to my crease. I'm going to hold the Alt key down on my keyboard and click, and that basically gives you the target. That's telling Photoshop, copy from here. And then I'm going to drag it over here and start to click. And my clone stamp tool also does not seem to be working. Oh, do I deselect this? Yeah. If you have something selected, go to Select and Deselect. So now hopefully mine will work. Yay! All right, so there you can see, and that little plus sign that's appearing to the left of your cursor, that's where you're copying from. So this is really useful, especially if you're working on, like, you know, there's a slight gradient to this background. It's not a solid gray color. And that copying from nearby allows me to kind of preserve that gradient in the background. If that makes sense. So the clone stamp tool, again, you can always click Alt again to, you know, copy from somewhere else. And just click away to get rid of all these imperfections. I'm going to use the clone stamp tool to get rid of these since my stamp brush tool did not work. All right. Questions about these? Just a really brief introduction to some of the retouching tools in Photoshop. All right. All right, so I'm happy with this, but the one thing I really want to do still is I want to brighten the intensity of this photo. It's a little washed out for me, all right? So Photoshop has what's called adjustment layers, which you can do things like brighten and intensify and do all different things to your pixels. So over here in your panels on the right side of your screen, under Learn, you probably have the Learn tab open, but there's an Adjustments tab right here. If you click on that, you get all of these different adjustments. And if you hover over them, it'll tell you what they are. This one's brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, including one for hue saturation. So if I click that, I'm going to have this Properties panel open, which shows me my hue, basically allows me to change the actual hue of different colors. So if I drag this little lever around, you can see it's actually recoloring. There now they look all blue or all green. So that's kind of fun, right? But that's not actually what I want to do. So I'm going to move that one back to 0. Because the hue is actually okay. I just want to bump up the saturation. So I'm going to bring this one. And if you go too far, they start to look weird and psychedelic and not good, right? But again, if I just bump it up to maybe something like that, again, it's making those colors, every color a little more intense, but still of the original color. It's not actually adjusting the color, all right? And whenever you add an adjustment layer, it's actually adding a layer. So Photoshop works in layers. You can see this layer 0, that's our photo as we brought it in. When we added this hue saturation adjustment layer, it just added this on top. So if you go here to your layers panel and do the little eyeball, you can turn this on and off to really give you a before and after. Do you like what that is doing or not? You can, if you don't like it, you could always delete that layer entirely by clicking on the little trash can. You can add more adjustment layers. You could add lots of them on top to give different effects. Okay. So those are the basics of Photoshop. Questions about Photoshop? Anything we've done? Okay, so again, we're getting like the very basic of these tools, again, because we're trying to do all 3 in 1 hour. Again, you're just getting a little bit. I'll show you at the end some places where you can get more in-depth tutorials about each of these programs. All right. So I'm happy with this. I think it's ready to go ahead and use in my postcard. So I'm going to go to File and choose Save As. I'm going to, by default, it saves it as a .psd. That's going to be an editable Photoshop file. So if I wanted to come back and edit my layers later, I could do that. I'm just going to go ahead and save it as a JPEG. I'm going to save my type, change that to JPEG again, and just save. I'm going to replace my original. Every time you save in Adobe, it's going to give you a box of options. Generally, you can just say OK. The default options are generally going to give you a good, high-quality file. So I'm just going to say OK. All right. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close up Illustrator and, close up Photoshop. And then go ahead and get your computer opening Illustrator. That's the next one we're going to use. All right, so Illustrator is not a raster-based graphic program. We just talked about how Photoshop manipulates the pixels in an image to give you the effect you want. Illustrator does not have pixels. Instead, it's called a vector-based graphing program. Does anyone know what a vector is? Did you know?
I just know that like you can scroll into it as far as you can, but it won't like pixelize it.
Yes. So that is the output is that it's infinitely scalable because it's not made of pixels. All right. We've all seen pixelated images where obviously the person blew up an image too much and those pixels became visible to the naked eye, right? And that looks terrible. Illustrator is not. The graphics you create in it are not created with pixels. Instead, they're created with points and paths. So if you imagine a circle in Photoshop is made up of tiny little dots arranged in a circle, right? A circle in Illustrator is created by 4 points at the point of each of the circle, connected by a curved line. There are no pixels. It's all done with points and math. So if you had a little tiny circle, it's going to make the points there and connect them with a path. If you blew it up to any size you wanted, it would just move those points, redraw the path that connects those points, and you'd have a great circle at that new size. Okay. So the output is that Illustrator is infinitely scalable, which means that the same file could work for something you put on a business card or something you put on a, the side of your jet, right? Infinitely scalable. All right, so in this program, we're going to create a logo, this little flower logo for our fictional Chapel Hill florist. Welcome, come on in. So because, again, logos have to be so scalable, they have to work really small, they have to work really big. Illustrator is the perfect program to create them in. So we're going to create a new document. Once you have Illustrator open, go to Create New. And again, it doesn't really matter what size we create this at, again, because it's infinitely scalable. But for the purposes of today, I'm just going to go to the Art and Illustration tab here for presets. And this is important. Make sure everyone does this, because if you don't do this, you get confused and very confused. If you go to this points, change this points drop down to inches so that your increments of measure are in inches, because that makes sense to most of us more. Now I'm going to make my width 2 inches and my height 2 inches. All right. So I'm going to create a 2 by 2 inch artboard, and I'm going to go ahead and create. All right, so we were just in Photoshop. It's going to give you a little tutorial if you haven't used it before. I'm just going to close that up. Remind me later. So the interface, again, is very familiar from we were just in Photoshop. Again, toolbar on the left, options across the top, panels over here on the right. All right. This in Illustrator is called an artboard. That's just like your drawing space in Illustrator. It's called a canvas in Photoshop. Same thing though, all right? Here is our document. So we're going to start with creating this flower shape. And usually the easiest strategy is to start with a simple shape. So if you go to your Shapes tool, which is here, your rectangle tool is on top. If you click and hold on that, you can see there are other shape tools nested underneath. We're going to be using an Ellipse tool. So grab the Ellipse tool. If I click and drag, I've just created an ellipse, okay? If I grab, I just want to show you, if I grab the white arrow and select my tool, my circle, you can see now, it's very visible here, you can see the 4 points. The 4 points of my ellipse connected by the path, okay? So if you again go back to your black arrow and select your circle here, over here in your properties panel, this is like all the information about your circle, including the size of it. And then here under appearance, you have your fill and stroke. So every shape in Illustrator has a fill color, which is the color inside the shape, and a stroke color, which is like a border. So you can see right now my fill is set to white and my stroke is set to black, okay? If I click on these little boxes, you can see I can change. Maybe I want my fill to be this orangey color, and I want my stroke to be more of a brown color. You can also change the size. If you think that stroke's a little too heavy, you can change the size of your stroke. I'm going to leave mine at 1 point. You can also, if you don't want to stroke at all, this little white box with a red line through it, that means none. So a shape can have no stroke or no fill. All right, so I've set my fill to orange, my stroke to brown of my little circle here. If you want to move it around, your black tool is what you want to use. So if I grab my black tool, I can move it around my artboard. I can drag a corner to make it a slightly different size if you didn't get it quite the right shape you want. I'm going to elongate mine a little bit. Okay, so again, that black arrow is like your move tool. I'm moving it around. So if you look at our example, what we really want is a more petal shape instead of an ellipse shape. You can see right now my curved line through here. I kind of want to make this a more pointy edge, okay? So we talked about there are 2 arrows, basically. There's a black arrow, which is like your regular move tool. And then your white arrow, if you go ahead and select your white arrow, you can think of your white arrow as, it's called the direct selection tool. That is if you want to move an individual anchor point or path in your shape instead of the whole shape, right? So the black tool moves our whole circle around. If we want to manipulate just one anchor point, we use the white tool, all right? So I've got my white selection tool selected. I'm going to click on this top path to select it. And now I can see I can drag again. And when I'm dragging, now I'm just moving that one anchor point. The other anchor points are staying exactly where they should be. So you can see I can start to manipulate the shape of my ellipse. You can also see these handlebars have appeared here. These, if you actually click and drag on one of these, you can see that actually manipulates the curve of the paths on either side of this point. All right, so if I wanted to manipulate these, I could do that. It's not actually what I want to do. I'm going to Control Z or Command Z to undo that. All right. So again, black arrow is for moving a whole shape. White arrow is for moving an individual point. Yeah.
When I'm clicking on the anchor point, it's just like sliding the whole thing.
Sliding the whole thing. So probably you have all. If you click on the shape, all the points are selected. So go ahead, grab your white arrow, click on the shape, and then click on an individual point. And then click and move that point. Again, you're just telling it to select that one point instead of all points. All right, good. All right, so the other thing we can do, by default, when you create an ellipse, it's creating a curved path through each of those points, right? You've got a smooth curve on the path coming out of the point. I want to make that a corner point. So again, if I grab my white arrow, I select this point by clicking on it. And then over here in your appearance panel under by convert, I'm going to click here. You can see there's two kinds. There's a corner point and a curved point. Smooth point, I think they're called. So I'm going to click here on corner point, and you can see now I've got that point that I wanted for my petal shape. All right. Then I'm going to click here on this white anchor point down here to select it and do the same thing to make that one also pointy. All right. So now I've got my petal shape that I want for my flower logo. All right. So next I'm going to go to my black arrow, and now I've got one petal, but I need 5 petals. All right. So I can go ahead and do a Control-C, Control-V, or Command-C, Command-V on a Mac to copy paste. And then I'm going to move this one, and then to rotate this one, I've got my black arrow, I've selected the shape. If you hang your cursor outside the corner of your shape, you get this little curved arrow. I can now drag and rotate this a little bit over this way. So go ahead and do that. So you have 5. I'm going to do copy paste again, move over here and rotate. See if you can get the 5 petals in a way that you think looks good. You might have to fiddle with them a little bit to get them the way you like. If you decide that you want to change the stacking order, so as we add petals, it's stacking them on top of each other. If you want to change, maybe you really want this center one to be in front. If I select that with my black arrow and do a right click, there is an arrange option with the bring forward, bring back option. So I'm going to send this bring to front. You can see that brings it on top of all the other petals. So again, you can change the stacking order until you have them kind of in the way you like. You can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard to nudge shapes once you have it selected. Sometimes that's the easiest way if you're just moving things a little bit, to move, just to nudge things to get it the way you like. All right. So grab it, use your black arrow, select the shape, do a right click, and choose arrange, bring to front, or send to back. If this bring to front, bring to back nonsense is kind of annoying, you can also go to your layers panel over here, open up this caret, and you can see here are all your layers basically, and then you could actually reorder this way as well by clicking and dragging shapes. So sometimes that is easier than the other way. Maybe I like that. All right. Anyone want me to do any of that again? Make sense to everyone? All right, once I'm happy with my flower shape, I don't want them to move a little anymore, so I'm going to select them all and group them. So again, I'm going to use my black arrow. I'm going to click and drag a box around all of those shapes so they're all selected. Then I'm going to right click and choose group. And now they're all grouped, and when I grab my black arrow to move them, they're all going to move together. All right. All right, so I like these colors okay, but really what would be best is if I grab some colors from my photo that I'm going to use for my postcard, right? So I wanted to show you how to create new color swatches. You're certainly not limited to the colors that are here in this like predefined palette for you, all right? So what we're going to do basically is we're going to bring that image in and use the eyedropper to select a couple colors and then apply those colors to our shapes in our petal flower shape, all right? So if we go to File and choose Place, so for some reason Adobe uses the command Place instead of Insert. It really means the same thing. So I'm going to go to Place. I'm going to go to wherever you downloaded that. I'm going to do my desktop. Choose that JPEG, And then if you click once, it'll place it full size, which is way, way bigger than you need it. So instead, I'm just going to click and drag out a box to make a little and put the photo there. All right. So again, that's File, Place, put your image here. All right. So what I want to use this corally color. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Again, if you have a trackpad that does the pinching motion, you can zoom in that way. If you don't, you can do Control plus on a PC or Command plus on a Mac to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in on this. I really want to use this corally pink color and then a brown from my basket for my shape, okay? So I'm going to grab this eyedropper, which allows you to, again, just select a color from an object. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool. I'm going to select this nice pinky coral color. You can see it didn't actually do anything except it did change this color over here. Because if I now open this fill color, that's the color that I selected out of my image. And the easiest thing to do at this point is to go ahead and create a new swatch with that color. All right. So again, it's like this little button. It's tiny. It looks like a Post-it note with the bottom corner folded up. If I click on that, it gives me a new swatch, you can see, of that coral color. I can name it Florist Coral and say OK. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my eyedropper. It probably opens your CC libraries and starts adding stuff there. I'm also going to choose a brown. Again, go back to your Properties panel. You can see it's now in the fill color. I'm going to click on that, do the same thing, create a new swatch, do Florist Brown, say OK. Now I've got my two colors. All right. Yeah. All right, so I really only put that picture in there so that I could get the colors. So I'm going to go ahead and select it with my black arrow and delete it. And now when I go back to this shape and I go to my Properties panel, I can change the fill. You can see these two little colors that are at the very end of this color. Those are the colors that I just created. So if I hover over it now, it says Florist Coral. So I'm going to change my fill to that. And I'm going to click on my stroke, and I'm going to change this to the brown from that as well. All right.
How did you get rid of the picture?
So if you grab your black arrow, click on the picture, and then just do delete or backspace on your keyboard. Yeah.
For mine, when I click on it, it does it like petal by petal instead of just doing it. So just click.
So I grouped them.
Yeah, I already did that.
You already did that, and it's still doing it one by one?
I don't know if I ungrouped it somehow.
If you grab one with your black arrow, does it move in? Oh, you're in isolation mode. See this gray bar?
Okay.
That happens when you double click on an object. You can always do escape to get out of it.
Awesome.
So now if you click on it, it should, select them all.
Awesome.
And the fill is like confused now. But, yeah.
Make the photo.
So if you go to File and choose Place, I'm sorry, it's not English, so I don't know. It should be somewhere in here. And then choose the basket of flowers, and then just click and drag out a box. So it's really tiny. You can resize it, yep. All right, if you didn't get that last step, again, I was just showing you how to create new colors instead of using the predefined colors that were already built into Illustrator. Any questions? Okay, so the last thing we need to do with our logo is to create a little bit of text. So I'm going to grab my type tool, which is right here. It's a big T. And I'm just going to click down here. It puts some fake text, some placeholder text in. But I'm going to call it Chapel Hill Flowers. All right. I'm going to highlight that text. And you can see now in your Properties panel, you have lots of character formatting options, including a font choice. So if you want to change your font, you can do that. The second drop down is for like bold, italic, kind of the weight or style of the type. I'm going to change this No, I don't like that. Change it to whatever you like. I like Lucidus Sans, so we'll use that one. Right. I'm also going to change the alignment to align center and drag this over so that it's aligned underneath my flower. And then I'm going to change the color. Right now, by default, it's creating it in black. I really want it to be my nice brown that I've chosen. So again, just like any shape in Illustrator, text also has a fill and a stroke. So I'm going to change the fill color here from black to my brown. All right. All right, so now you can see my whole thing is just a little bit small. So I want to select everything. Again, I'm going to use my black arrow. I'm going to drag a box around everything to select it all. And then I'm going to drag a corner. But notice that when you just drag a corner, it does not constrain proportions automatically. So you can see I could badly distort my flower, which can look really bad. And distorting text is especially terrible. So we don't want to do that. But if we hold the Shift key down as you drag a corner, you can see that it will constrain your proportions and not let you distort your shape. All right, I got it a little too big. Again, I'm going to hold Shift, and then I'm just going to try to space it kind of in the middle of my artboard, and that is looking pretty good. All right.
Did you group the whole thing?
I didn't. I just selected it. You can if you want, but I just used my black arrow to select everything by dragging a marquee around all of it.
And then what did you do?
And then I held the Shift key, and then just if you need to resize it all, I'm going to do that to make it just fit on my artboard. If your artboard is my artboard is a little too tall, you can see I have a little extra white space here. You can actually just change the size of your document on the fly with the Artboard tool, which is right here. If I click that, you can see now I can actually change the size of my artboard or my document. If your flower ended up being a little short like mine did, you can just adapt your artboard like that. All right.
Which tool?
It's this tool right here. It looks like a plus sign with a page sticking off the bottom corner. All right. So that was a super brief introduction to Illustrator. Questions? All right. So we're going to go ahead and save this. If we go to Save As, a .ai is an Adobe Illustrator file, so I definitely want to save it as that. That's going to be in my editable Illustrator document that I could come back to and change later. So I'm going to change this to Logo and save that to my desktop where I can easily find it again. Again, it gives you options. I'm just going to say OK. And then I also wanted to show you if you go to Save As and change the Save As file type, you can see here you have very limited options here in Illustrator as what kind of file to save it as. You can't save it here as a JPEG. Why can I not save it here as a JPEG? Anyone?
Raster versus vector.
Exactly. So this option here is only giving you the options, the file types that will preserve that vector format. All right. So SVGs are really great if you wanted to share a vector graphic on the web. EPS is good because they will actually embed in a Microsoft Word or PowerPoint document. So if you have a document in Microsoft that you were creating, you'll want an EPS to put it in. Or a PDF also works. All right. If you wanted a JPEG, you can get that by doing, instead of Save As, you can go to Export and Export for Screens. And you can see now I get my JPEG and PNG options. But again, this is going to rasterize my graphic. At this point, it's no longer a vector, so just be aware of that. You want to make sure it's at the size you actually want to use it at before you export it as a JPEG or PNG. All right? Questions about Illustrator? I think Illustrator is the most foreign to most people at first, but I actually think it's my favorite tool now. I feel like it really gives you amazing ability to do all kinds of creative things. All right, so I've saved it as a logo. I'm going to go ahead and close up Illustrator because we're going to move on to our last product, which is Adobe InDesign. So go ahead and get that one launching. And while it does, we'll talk about what InDesign is good for. So InDesign is basically a desktop publishing tool. So it is really great at creating documents that incorporate graphics and text. It's especially good at doing multi-page documents. So, and it is a pro tool that most of the books, magazines that you read on a daily basis were created in Adobe InDesign. It's really great, again, at making those multi-page documents and incorporating lots of text. So today we're going to be creating our postcard design. So we're going to go, once InDesign launches, we're going to go ahead and create a new document. If we go to print, we can see it actually doesn't have the size I want. So again, I'm going to go to the units drop down and change it to inches because I understand inches better than picas. I'm going to make this a 6 by 4 inch postcard. So I'm going to change my width to 6 inches, my height to 4 inches. If you open up margins, you can see that it's giving you a 1/2 inch margin, which will just create a guideline at a 1/2 inch on your document, so that's good. And then I want to go ahead and open up bleed and slug. Does anyone know what a bleed is in document design? Has anyone heard that term? No? So when you get something professionally printed, like this calendar, and you want the color to go all the way to the edge of the document, a desktop printer can never do that, right? A professional printer can, and what they do is actually print this document slightly larger on a bigger piece of paper, and then they cut it at the bleed lines, basically. Make sense? And that's so that you don't get a little strip of white around the edge of your paper. That makes sense. So anytime you want color or a photo or something to go to the edge of your document, you have to create a bleed in InDesign. All right, so we're going to do, usually it's a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch. All right, so I'm going to open up my bleed settings and I'm going to just put 0.25 all the way around. All right, 0.25 inches. You can also lock so that they all have to be 0.25 inches. All right, does that make sense? All right, so again, my height is 4 inches, my width is 6 inches, my bleed is 0.25 inches, and then I'm going to go ahead and create. Okay. All right. So you can see here's my document. Again, the interface is very familiar by now. This is my document. You can see this black line, that's the edge of my document. This pink line is my 1/2 inch margin. And this blue line out here, that's my bleed. All right, so that's my 1/4 inch bleed. The way printers want you to do is any block of color or photograph that you want to print to the edge of the paper, you actually have to extend it beyond the edge of your document to this bleed line. Right? All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to place our photo that we manipulated in Photoshop in here in InDesign. So like we did in Illustrator, we're going to go to File and choose Place. And I'm going to choose my basket of flowers JPEG that I edited in Photoshop. And I'm going to click Open, and you can see it's kind of hanging off your cursor. And InDesign is like asking you, where do you want to put this? If you click once, again, it's going to make it full size, which is a lot bigger than, for instance, I want. So if I click here, you can see that's massive, way bigger than I needed. So I'm going to undo that with a Control-Z or a Command-Z so that it's on my cursor again. And instead, I'm going to click here at the edge of my bleed and click and drag out a box all the way down here to the bottom over here. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can see it's actually it's put the image inside that box I dragged out. All right, did that work for everyone? So you can see now it's overlapping the size of my document. If you want to resize it at any point, you would think that I could just drag a corner. But what that does is it does not resize the actual image. It resizes the frame that the image lives in, all right? And this is useful if you wanted to hide a portion of the image, right? Say you only wanted this image to take up half the screen and you wanted to like crop out half of it. You could do that. But that's not actually what I wanted to do, right? I'm going to drag my frame back out here. If you actually want to adjust the size of the image itself, if you hover over your image, you see this little donut in the center? If I click on that donut, now if I click and drag, and again hold your shift key down to constrain proportions, you can see now I'm actually changing the size of the image. Okay. Again, hover, get the donut, click on the donut, now click and drag a corner, and hold the shift key down to constrain proportions. All right. I want it about like that. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my logo that I created and put it down here. So make sure you don't have anything currently selected on your document. I usually just click off over here and then go to File and choose Place again and find your logo, AI, File. And again, I'm just going to click and drag a little box down here. And you can move it around wherever you want on the document. All right. It looks pixelated, right? It's not actually pixelated. So InDesign saves processing power in the program by not showing images at their full resolution, just again to save processing speeds. But if I go to View and choose Overprint Preview, you can see now everything is again rendered at its full resolution and everything looks great. Okay, so when you see pixelated things in InDesign, don't freak out until you choose Overprint Preview. If you choose that and everything looks crisp and clear, then you're good. If things still look pixelated, then you've maybe blown up an image too much and you're actually going to have pixelation. Right?
When I try to make mine bigger, it like crops off around the
Yes. Yes, so exactly. So I'm going to turn Overprint Preview off again. So again, if I select this image and change this box, again, it's cropping out, you're right. It's changing the frame that the image lives in, which is not what I want to do. So instead of that, I'm going to hover, click on the donut.
Oh, for me, it's the logo. Like
Oh, the logo. The logo works the same way. So if I click on this, again, it's going to crop it, which is not what I want. If you hover, get the donut. Click on the donut, and now if you resize it, it should actually resize the actual image.
It's like the thing is the original shape that it's in prevents it when I try to make it bigger, it gets cut off at the original shape even after I put the donut.
Okay, yeah. So now just click off.
So that happened. So I like clicked the
Oh,
donut and then spread
so
out.
now click off, and now click on it again. And now, so don't click on the donut this time. So you actually want to change your frame. Your frame is like hiding part of it. So now click your blue box and drag that out. So your frame was hiding part of your image.
okay.
Does that make sense?
How do I prevent that in the future?
I'm not sure why it happened. Maybe the box you dragged out was the wrong size. I'm not sure actually.
Okay.
You can also right click on an image and go to the fitting options, and it gives you some options to like fit in. Does that make sense? So that's often useful as well. Yeah. Yeah, so if your images are looking pixelated, go to View and choose Overprint Preview. And again, that's just telling InDesign render all of my images at their full resolution, and that should take the pixelation away from your images, and everything should look nice and crisp.
Okay, but the flower logo, that won't be pixelated in the first place, right? Just
It won't.
Okay.
It looks pixelated when the Overprint Preview is turned off sometimes, but it's not. And again, it's a vector, so it will never be pixelated. But yeah. Okay, other questions here? So that's placing and resizing images in InDesign. Our last step is just to add some text. So I'm going to grab, again, it's the text tool. It looks like a big T. And whereas in Illustrator we just clicked and started typing, you cannot do that in InDesign. In InDesign you always have to create a text frame first for your text to live in. So I'm going to grab my text tool. I'm going to click and drag out a box kind of here. And I'm going to type Mother's Day sale here. When I select the text, you can see my properties panel over here, and you've got all your character formatting options here. So I can find something I like here. And I tell you, there are not that many nice fonts on these computers. That's okay. I did want to make sure you knew that there are lots of fonts out there besides the ones just installed that come pre-installed on your computer. One of the nice tools that Adobe has, if you go here to your type, your font choice drop-down, you can go to this Find More right here. And these are all fonts that live in, what's it called? Adobe Typekit, which is Adobe's font library. Basically, there's a massive library of fonts owned by Adobe that we have access to because we have Adobe IDs. So I can scroll through here and find something I like. Maybe Acme Gothic Wide I really like. I can click on this little cloud button, and it just basically, you have to activate the fonts, which brings them down onto your computer. And now you can see I've got this new font selected. Well, it didn't work, but it should have worked. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to it is basically downloading the fonts and putting them on your machine so that you can use them in your designs. All right. So just know that that is an option. You can actually, if you Google Adobe fonts in a browser, you can actually get to the font library, and sometimes that's an easier way to look for fonts too. I can remember the URL. Oh, it's fonts.adobe.com. So this is nice. Again, it's like a giant library. You can browse and find lots of really nice fonts. All right, so know that that is an option for you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and change the fill. Again, by default, InDesign does not give you many pretty colors to start from. It gives you these horrible primary colors. So I'm going to go back to my eyedropper tool. If I click and hold, this is actually the color theme tool, which is not that useful. If you click and hold on it, you can get the regular old eyedropper tool. And then I can click here and apply that. Again, it changed the fill color, which is not ideal. But now I can actually add this as a swatch, just the way we did before. All right, so I'm going to add a new swatch. You can see now it's in my swatches. I'm going to change my fill back to none. None, thank you. I'm going to grab my text with my text tool. And now I can change the fill again to the swatch that I created. I probably lost most people. I'm trying to hurry so that we can finish on time. But basically the process we went through in Illustrator, where we brought in our image, we used the eyedropper to select a color, we added it to our swatches. You can do the same thing here in InDesign. All right. Alternately, once you decide on a color, you can write down the RGB values or the CMYK values and then put them in here as well. Okay. All right. So I've got one more line of text I'm going to create right here. I think I said, because doesn't every mother deserve flowers? Oops. All right, one thing to note, you can see now I created too much text to fit in my text frame. And by default, InDesign is not going to resize your text frame. It's just going to hide the text that didn't fit. And you get this little plus sign, meaning, hey, you have text that's not showing. All right. In this case, I could make my font size smaller, or I could make my text frame larger. All right, I'm going to go ahead and select all of this text and just make my font size a little smaller so that it all fits. All right. Again, the black arrow will allow you to move objects around your design like this. All right. So again, InDesign we always run out of time. Does anyone get the idea, the basics of InDesign? In InDesign, really, you're just placing images and creating text in different shapes and layouts. All right. So when I go to save, I'm going to save as a .indd. INDD, again, that's my editable InDesign document. So I'm going to name this postcard. Put it on my desktop. So that's good. But again, I want to send this to a printer or send this to my friend or post it on my website. So I need a PDF. So I'm going to go again to export. And this is where you have lots of different options to export it. You can export it as JPEG here, and it defaults to Adobe PDF Print. That is the option I want, Adobe PDF Print. I'm going to save it. Again, it's defaulting to a nice high quality print, which is good. One thing I do want to change, I want to go ahead to marks and bleeds. And remember we set that whole bleed thing up. I'm going to say all printers marks, which basically turns on the bleed, and then use bleed document bleed settings here. And then I'm going to export because I want to show you what that looks like. If I open up that PDF, I don't know what it's going to open up with on this computer. Okay. So this is what my PDF looks like. You can see the colors have gone again to that bleed setting with crop marks. Okay, that's going to enable my printer to print, and again I'll have that full color all the way to the edge of my paper. If I printed this to a desktop printer, it will add a little strip of white around the outside of my document. Right? If you just save as a regular PDF and turn off marks and bleeds, then it'll just look like a regular old PDF and it'll look really great. Okay? All right, so again, if you're like slightly confused by any of the stuff we did today, that's probably normal. Adobe, again, it's complex software. It's really a pro tool. People spend years learning this stuff. So again, you've gotten a little taste of it today. On the website for today, I did want to go ahead and link to some of our recommended Lindo tutorials. So again, if you decide from today, ooh, Photoshop is really interesting, you can go to here, and these are really good Lindo tutorials or video tutorials that you can just spend 4 hours learning Photoshop. All right, so we've got our favorites listed for Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. You can also come get help in the design lab with an Adobe project. You can ask at the front desk or go to our website and make an appointment with us. Okay? Thank you very much for coming. I'll hang out. If there are questions afterwards, you can ask me. All right? Thank you.